Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. April 18th, 2018.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services. Cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services.
Hello, this is James Brown, the Godfather of Soul. I feel good. You're checking out my man, Mike Siegel. Hit it, buddy. Hit it, buddy. Hit it, buddy.
Welcome in, folks. Good to have you with us. We get back into our conversation. It's a pleasure to be here at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. And we are delighted to have with us a gentleman who's going to give us some background on some very troubling matters, as we heard in the last hour about other troubling matters. This time it's the one word immigration, which is an inflammatory word these days. Didn't used to be. In the old days, we were delighted that people came to the Statue of Liberty and were entered into this country and came in groups, did it properly, and made this great nation what it is. It's changed with chaos, people coming in illegally and all the rest of that. And the Federation for American Immigration Reform has been at the forefront of trying to get sanity back into the policies of this country. We seem to have mostly the laws, but the policies and the carrying out of those laws has been the problem. Ira Melman is Director of Media Relations for FAIR. Mr. Melman, it's nice to have you with us. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure to talk to you. Let me start with something that could be a sneaky way to get us into a situation of having DACA done without anything else, although the president would still have to sign the bill. But there are some reports now that Paul Ryan, who's going to retire at the end of this year, may well want to put through in a budget bill or some other form. We've got a budget till October, I guess, till October 1st when the new fiscal year starts. And that's what this budget does. But even in a separate bill, giving DACA to those young people, now maybe older people, who came in as children, and everyone understands that issue. Is there any concern that Paul Ryan may try to do that, since he tried to do it in a previous budget bill and was shot down on it, couldn't get it off the ground?
There's always that possibility. And, you know, in the last budget bill, the omnibus bill, which passed last month, there were provisions in there for more cheap labor for American businesses that don't want to actually have to go out and pay American wages to American workers to do the jobs. So there's always opportunity for mischief, and it's becoming more and more the case in these budgetary cycles. You know, years ago, I had worked for the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives, and it was sort of an unwritten rule that you never put in these sorts of legislative matters into spending bills. Now that's all changed. You've got politicians who try to sneak things in the dead of night, especially in must-pass budget bills. So, you know, we're going to be watching closely what he does. But, you know, the president has also said that he is not going to, well, I mean, he said lots of things. We'll see if he carries through. But he has indicated that he does not think this is the way to go about doing this.
Well, and that becomes problematic because, as you and I have discussed, even when the Senate bill was voted on, there wasn't enough Republican support. There were 51 Republicans in the Senate. Theoretically, they couldn't get past the 60-vote threshold for the filibuster. But even in the vote itself, it was something like, I don't know, 64 to 32 or something like that. Or 36 votes, 30 or maybe 38 votes, but it wasn't even all Republicans. In fact, it was about 2/3 of the Republicans who voted for that DACA bill that included the end of the migration issue and the end of lottery visas. Chain migration would be gone, the wall would be built, and the 1.8 million would get DACA status permanently. Even that didn't get all the Republican support.
No, even that didn't. Look, I mean, the president basically sold out in that budgetary cycle. He was willing to offer far more in the way of amnesty than he had indicated previously. He was willing to accept a lot less in return, and it was flat out rejected by the Democrats. I don't think it got a single Democratic vote in the Senate, and as you point out, a lot of Republicans didn't vote for it either. So, you know, both parties have been culpable here. You know, clearly the Democratic Party in its entirety has moved over to the side of just amnesty, no enforcement whatever. They object to the wall. They object to E-Verify. They object to just about anything, cutting off sanctuary cities from federal dollars. They just don't want any kind of enforcement. They want amnesty only. And then you've got a significant chunk of the Republican Party that, they sort of amnesty light. They're not too thrilled about enforcement. They want lots of cheap labor. Look, I mean, it's no secret that Congress is held in low esteem by the American people, and this is a clear example of why they are held in such low esteem. I guess what will be different in the upcoming budget cycle, the fiscal year ends on September 30th. Theoretically, they should have a new budget in place ready to go on October 1. The elections are coming up. There is a midterm election. This is popular with the voters. Enforcing our immigration laws is actually very popular with voters across the board. Maybe with the reality of a midterm election where the party in power generally doesn't do that well to begin with, coming home to the voters with something that they can say is an accomplishment that protects the interests and the jobs and the security of the American people, maybe that'll light a fire under them. I don't know, but we're going to find out in the next couple of months.
Well, the problem is, you pointed it out, and I make this point repeatedly, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce puts in sometimes as much as $80 million in an election cycle for candidates, both Republican and Democrat, but particularly moderate Republicans who are willing to go along with illegal immigration continuing. There's still the battle. That's the reason that this goes on the Republican side. Of course, Democrats want the votes of the illegals when they become legal, or in California, they vote illegally anyway, so it doesn't matter. But the real point here is that both parties have an interest in keeping the illegal immigration going, and it's only the American people that can change them. They got to believe they're going to be voted out on that issue. I said back in the early 90s, until the American people make immigration a front burner issue, it's going to just go on the way it is, because both have an interest in keeping the illegal immigration coming in.
Well, it actually is a front burner issue. If you look at all the polling, and particularly among Republican voters, there was a poll out a couple of weeks ago that showed immigration was on par with the economy in terms of concerns for Republican voters. It's also an issue for a lot of independents. Those are the people who swing elections. Look, the Congress for a long time has been ignoring the will of the American people. This issue probably more so than any others, but it's not just this issue. In general, Congress just doesn't care what the American public thinks about anything. They care about what a handful of special interests really want, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or whether it is some loud ethnic interest groups. They cater to those demands. They ignore the interests of the American people because they know, look, you got two bad choices here. You can pick one party or the other. It depends who you want, to end up, giving you the shaft.
Well, and that's why the American people need to understand that maybe this should be the issue. If you're going to be a single issue voter, maybe immigration ought to be that single issue. Are you going to support building the wall? Are you going to support ending chain migration? Are you going to support entering lottery visas? Are you going to support making E-Verify mandatory? Maybe those are questions that ought to be asked by the voters, and some kind of contract with the voters on the part of candidates to do all of those things.
You mentioned ending chain migration. There's a poll done by Harvard University every month, and it was either their March or their February poll, they asked about ending chain migration, replacing it with a merit-based immigration system. 84% of voters, that's all voters, 84% of voters said we should get rid of chain migration, replace it with a merit-based immigration system, and that included 75% of Democratic voters. You can't get less controversial than an issue that has 75% support from the American people. 84% from the American people, 75% from registered Democrats, and yet Congress doesn't do it. Look, Congress has about a 12% approval rating. They have earned it.
Well, the bottom line is they're getting paid off legally by corporations, supplying them with money for their campaigns, and that's why it's happening that way, against the wishes of the American people, as you just pointed out. Well, let's talk about sanctuary cities and counties and states. Last night, San Diego County joined the lawsuit against the state of California. Some cities in San Diego County did it previously, Orange County as well. some other cities. They say that there may be, now there's something like over 3 million of the residents of California in jurisdictions where there is opposition to the sanctuary state status. They're going after Jerry Brown, and that it may go as many as 6 or 7 million by the time they're done joining with the lawsuit and opposing California as a state. And of course, now there's a serious campaign by a billionaire in California to break California into 3 separate states. And because of the money that he has, there's a possibility. It's on the referendum in November anyway. So, but what about the revolution in California against California?
Well, it's certainly welcome. And by the way, I think it's already up to over 6 or 7 million. If San Diego County, which is the second largest county in California, has joined, and Orange County, which is the third largest, that gets you up to over 6 million right there. So there is a growing revolt within California to the radical, extreme radical policies of Sacramento when it comes to immigration, probably a lot of other issues. But, what they've done in California is say, we would rather put criminal aliens back out onto the streets in your community than turn them over to the federal government to be deported from the United States. It is just irresponsible. It is putting public safety at risk because you don't like the policies of the Trump administration and you don't like the laws of the United States. This is an issue not just about immigration, but about how the republic is going to function. If you're going to have 50 entities saying, we're going to pick and choose which federal policies we're going to abide by and which ones we're not, this nation is going to fall apart. So, even if you agree with California's policies on sanctuary, just the idea that you can have a state that is going to say we're going to disregard the laws of the land, impose our own policies, and at the same time endanger public safety, you're just inviting other states to do the same thing on other issues. And some of those issues you may think the states ought to go along with. But, once you've established that if a state doesn't like what the federal government is doing, they can just opt out. We don't have much left of the nation.
Well, you're right about that because and there's the direct violation of federal law here, and the Supremacy Clause of the Constitution basically says that if the federal government takes control of an area of the law, that any conflicting laws at the state or local level are going to be void on their face. And that's why, but you have judges in California who couldn't care less about that, and that's why, frankly, this has got to get to the United States Supreme Court. But last night, Griff Jenkins of Fox went head on right at Jerry Brown, the governor, about the fact that he doesn't care about the residents and is protecting illegal aliens. And they got into a confrontation, and all Jerry Brown would say, it's a Fox News thing. But, the bottom line of it is he doesn't give a damn about the citizens of California. If he did, he wouldn't have allowed for that 5-time returning illegal alien to this country, 5 times illegally returning, to be out in the streets. When ICE asked to detain him, the sheriff in San Francisco County, who I think is now gone, wouldn't return him over. So then he gets out on the street and then he kills Kate Steinle, whether it was accidental or not. He had a gun. The gun went off. It killed her. And then he walks away from that. And it's only because the federal government's prosecuting him now that he's even being held. So, I would say to Jerry Brown, you're running under the RICO statutes an ongoing criminal conspiracy by protecting illegal aliens, because just entering the country illegally is a crime, and then you protect them from any kind of accountability, and even DUIs get brought down to lower level crimes when American citizens under DUI get punished to the hilt, which they should. But the illegal aliens get protected with lower level crimes. That's why Jerry Brown is the head of an organized crime operation, in my view, by protecting illegal aliens to go out and commit violent crimes in some of the cases.
Well, this is consistent with California's policy over the past decade or so. California is perpetually strapped for cash. They're always on the brink of some kind of fiscal disaster. They cut benefits to people around the state. They raise everybody's taxes. But at the same time, they dream up new protections, new benefits for illegal aliens. In Sacramento, that's, what gets them out of bed in the morning is what can we do for illegal aliens? Even if it costs the American people and taxpayers, they're willing to do it. If it endangers public safety, they are willing to do it. And you're right. I mean, something has to happen. The only thing that can happen is that the people of California have to say to the people who are making these policies in Sacramento, enough is enough. We may be liberal in many areas, but we're not going to tolerate you putting criminals back out on the streets because you don't like the federal immigration law. We're not going to tolerate the mayor of Oakland essentially obstructing justice by tipping off people who are the target of ICE enforcement actions and saying, you better go run and hide because ICE is coming next week to carry out an enforcement operation. That is plain and simple obstruction of justice. If it takes some prosecution from the U.S. Department of Justice to get these people in line, then so be it. But really, it's also up to the voters of California to say, we've had it. We are not going to continue to fund these crazy policies that benefit illegal aliens at the expense of everybody else and endanger public safety. That simply ought not to be acceptable. And somebody, whether it's the voters or the Department of Justice, needs to do something about it.
Well, and that's the lawsuit is there. I don't know how actively they're pursuing it, but it's sitting in federal court. We'll see how it plays out. But there needs to be much more aggressive action. And I'm glad to see that some of those California jurisdictions are joining with that lawsuit. We'll come right back with Ira Melman, Director of Media Relations, Federation for American Immigration Reform. You ought to get involved with this organization. They do a great job. fairus.org, FAIRUS.org. Become a member and join and support them because they're doing the work that needs to be done on this issue. Coming up to 121 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Back we are. Good to have you with us. 125 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner on the Kuhner Report. He has the week off, for the rest of the week anyway. Glad to have you with us. Back with Ira Melman, Director of Media Relations at the Federation for American Immigration Reform. It's fairus.org. Mr. Melman, let me ask you about the status of that migration from Central America. We saw that Honduras or El Salvador both had people that were marching from there through Mexico. At one point, the government of Mexico would let them through because they knew they were coming to the United States and not staying in Mexico, even though Mexico enforces its own immigration laws forcefully. But in the meantime, we sent at least hundreds of National Guard troops down to the border. General Mattis, Secretary Mattis now, of course, at Defense, authorized up to 4,000 National Guard troops, not to stand at the border and do any direct work with the illegals, but to do backup work on infrastructure, clearing out jungle-type areas where the guys could get through there, fixing roads, working on equipment, working with the drones, getting intelligence reports, all of that, while the Customs and Border Patrol agents do the work at the front lines. What is the status of that migration? Have we broken it up?
Well, it's certainly less than it was. A lot of people have kind of given up and, I guess, gone home. But there's still some contingent that seems determined to make it to this country. But the bottom line is that we can't be dealing with these individual crises. What we need to be dealing with are the incentives that draw people to come to the United States illegally in this manner. They know that if they can get to the border of the United States, especially if they're minors, they're going to be able to stay for a long, long time, that there's going to be a lengthy process. And by the end of the process, if they even show up for it, everybody will have thrown up their hands and said, forget about it. What we need to do is close loopholes in our laws that Congress is well aware of that allow people to abuse our system. We have an asylum policy that is being widely abused. Back in the 1990s, it was happening at airports. President Clinton actually acted. He said, you know what? We're not going to allow people to abuse our asylum process. We're not going to allow people to show up at airports and file bogus asylum claims and just let them in. He put adjudicators at airports. If you didn't have a plausible case to make, they put you back on the next flight from wherever it is that you came from. The same thing needs to happen at the border. We need adjudicators to make a determination. Does this person have a legitimate claim to pursue? If not, we're not going to waste time and resources. We also need to close a loophole in the Anti-Trafficking Act. Some years ago, Congress passed a bill. It was a well-intentioned bill to prevent human trafficking. what it has done is it has encouraged human smuggling. It says that if you're not from Canada or Mexico, if you are brought to this country illegally, we can't just simply turn you around and send you back. What we need to do is give you a lengthy process. Everybody knows the system is backed up, that we don't have the detention facilities, that there are limits on how long you can hold people in any event, that you'll be out on the street. You'll have a court date, a couple of years down the line. You're probably not going to show up for it. Nobody's ever going to come looking for you. These are the sorts of things that go on. We know about these problems. We know how to fix these problems, but Congress doesn't fix anything.
Let me ask you finally about the Supreme Court decision. Unfortunate that Mr. Justice Gorsuch actually voted with a majority in a decision about whether a guy should be detained, given the fact he had committed a couple of burglaries. But because the law said something about violent crimes, it turns out that the court said this is too vague. It doesn't enumerate specifically what the crimes are that are sanctioned and would allow you to keep this guy incarcerated. And so Gorsuch went with the majority. By the way, apparently Scalia did the same thing because of vagueness and overbroad are two categories that make a law unconstitutional. This was too vague, at least according to Gorsuch and the four liberals on the court. What do you make of it?
Well, again, this is another example of a loophole in laws or a poorly written law that needs some tweaking. They could easily fix this if Congress were doing its job. They could say, look, okay, the courts say we need to be a little more specific. We're going to pass an amendment to this law, fix it. But again, this doesn't happen. We should never have reached this point in the first place. And it's also true that when you come to the United States as a legal immigrant, it is contingent on you behaving yourself. It is a conditional agreement between the United States and the immigrant. We allow you to come here and pursue life, liberty, and happiness, and in exchange, you promise that you are going to obey the laws of this country, that you're not going to become a public charge. That has been the way we have operated in this country for decades, more than a century. So these are the sorts of things that we need to continue to do. And if the law needs to be fixed, then Congress ought to do its job and fix the law. A lot of the problems that we're facing are, easily solved if Congress would simply make logical changes to good laws, close some loopholes that have been exposed, and, we wouldn't be facing these sorts of situations. But that's not what Congress does these days. They just I'm not sure what they do, but they're not doing anything that benefits the American public.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Millman. It's always a pleasure. FairUS.org is the website. Love talking to you and appreciate your time today.
Anytime. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ira Millman, Director of Media Relations at FAIR 131. Your calls are welcome on the other side at 617-266-6868. If you care about this country, let's hear from you. We got to stop the nonsense. Immigration has to be legal, not illegal. We have to make the changes he just described, and your country is being walked on, and with the help of people like Jerry Brown, the Cosa Nostra godfather of California. Good to have you with us at the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
WRKO, the Voice of Boston.
We're back at it. Good to have you with us. 136 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We get into this serious question of immigration. Nothing changes. A lot of talk, but no action. How does it make any sense to let people into this country illegally and then to allow them to come back 5 times illegally and then kill Kate Steinle and nothing gets done in California about it? They protect the guy as if he was some sort of sacrosanct individual. Jerry Brown gets confronted last night by Griff Jenkins of Fox News and just blames Fox and doesn't take any responsibility, in my view, for being the godfather of a corrupt organized crime operation in California protecting illegal aliens coming in first time they come in. It is an illegal act under Title 8, Section 1325 of the U.S. Code. First offense is 6 months and or a civil fine. That's a misdemeanor. Second offense, 2 years and or a civil fine. That's a felony. And this guy's protecting these people. Libby Schaaf, what did she do? She obstructed justice by telling these criminals to hide out. And they get downplayed to lower level crimes when they do DUIs so they don't get punished for that. It goes on and on and on, and your country is being taken away from you by the left-wing radicals who seem to think anybody should be able to come in here without any borders. We go to your calls. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner at 266-6868 on the Voice of Boston. Carlos in Saugus, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, Mike. Carlos Hernandez. I'm running for Congress in the 6th District. And, my God, I don't know who these people are representing. I mean, we are citizens. I mean, the illegals get treated better than the citizens. On that interview that you saw, apparently, I think he was also questioned regarding a little girl that got killed by an illegal that they let go because they would not honor the retainer.
Correct.
What in the world is going on here?
Well, and then Brown, his name now is Giro Brown Genovese. That's his new name to me. He says he cares. He says he cares about people. He doesn't give a damn about people.
No, of course they don't. I mean, hey, look, I am a legal immigrant. I came here. I had to carry a green card. Like that, your last guest said. Basically, when you become a legal immigrant, you cannot be a burden on the state. You cannot basically get in trouble. You cannot do anything, and you're supposed to abide by all the laws. And on top of that, I mean, my God, so what good is it to actually abide by the law, come here legally, and then get kicked out for basically obeying the laws of the United States?
Hey, look, and how many years? Thank you for calling, Carlos. I appreciate it. And good luck in your campaign. How many years does a person who comes into this country legally wanting to get citizenship does it take? I've talked to people from Canada, thousands and thousands of dollars and years and years and years. I think I actually worked at a radio station on Long Island a number of years ago, doing an afternoon drive show. And the receptionist at the station was from Canada with her husband. They had taken something like 8 years to finally get citizenship and close to $20,000 in cost because of the process they had to go through. That's what it cost them. And people walk across with this nonsense that they're supposed to be able to come into this country from Mexico by the circumventing from Honduras and El Salvador and coming across through Mexico up to the United States. Are you kidding me? What are we, the dumping ground for illegals? Mexico wouldn't allow it. The Mexican national law 67 puts people behind bars if they are illegally in their country. And every Mexican federal official, state official, and local official is required when they have suspicion of somebody being in their country illegally to check them out. And we do nothing. Jerry in Cape Cod, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Mike, thanks for taking the call. Great job as usual. When are we going to get you back here full time? Is that coming soon?
I don't know.
Mike, let's place the blame where it belongs. Cheap labor and votes. I'm just going to run through this in my head here. Between DACA and the Dreamers, you got 3.6 million people. You add the DAPA people, their parents in on it, that's 7.2 million people. That's almost 11 million people right there. The average age of these so-called children is 26. The maximum age is 39. We spend $132 billion a year on illegal aliens. The Center for
It's actually $135 billion, but you're right.
The Center for Immigration Studies says that it costs each taxpayer almost $9,400 a year each to support these people. Now, there's no racial component in this because allegedly in Boston, visa overstays, you've got 28,000 Irish nationals, 22,000 Eastern European nationals, and 18,000 Italian nationals on visa overstays, which makes up 60%, they say, of illegal aliens. And lastly, Mike, the FBI statistic from 2000 to 2016, 95,869 Americans were murdered at the hands of illegal aliens.
That's a horrifying number, number one. Number two, the $135 billion a year we spend.
It's criminal.
We only get about $15 billion back in taxes, so it's a net loss of $115 billion. It's just it's a siphoning out of this country much of our economy. We could use that toward reducing the national debt. The bottom line is we ought to have, and look how much trouble it is to try to get money for the wall. Where's Lindsey Graham? Where's John McCain? Where's Jeff Flake? Where's Susan Collins? Where's Lisa Murkowski? Where's Heller from Nevada? All Republicans. Where the blank are they, sir? Where are they voting in favor of putting up a wall which works. Somebody tell me it doesn't work in Israel, and I got some land for you in the Everglades.
Well, Mike,
because in Israel it works. They have a 30. I've been there. It's a 30-foot very solid fence, and it triggers if you touch it. It doesn't hurt you, but it triggers a response on the equipment in the bunker that the IDF has at that border 24/7. It's watched, and if it ever gets touched, that fence, it triggers where it is specifically. They send troops over there to check it. There's never been a homicide bombing where that fence is from Jordan or from Lebanon or from Syria. Isn't that interesting? No homicide bombings at all since the fence was put up. Why can't we do the same?
Mike, you're absolutely right. And just like the Great Wall of China, you're telling me that doesn't work, Hadrian's Wall? Of course it does. But,
by the way, in the old days, it protected them from Mongolia. Absolutely right. I thank you, Jerry, for calling. Look, if anybody cares about this, the number is 617-266-6868. Right here in Boston and several other cities. These are sanctuary cities. Does anybody care about this? Does anybody have concern that illegal aliens, whether in Boston, whether in Seattle, whether in Oakland, whether in San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, any of those sanctuary cities, the bottom line is they're undermining jobs for minorities as well as others who want these lower skilled jobs. They're undermining our country. They're causing crime in some cases. And, you know, when the other side says, well, look, legal people commit crimes too, that begs the question. You have to stop importing illegals to stop those crimes that are being committed. And obviously not all and not most of illegal aliens commit violent crimes. It's a smaller number. But you don't want to have any violent crimes from illegal aliens. Unfortunately, we had to deal with O.J. Simpson, with his barbaric murder of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman. He's a citizen. He has to go through the process. But we don't need to have illegal aliens here to have to add one problem on top of another. 617-266-6868. Nick in Weymouth, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Good afternoon, Mike. Here in Massachusetts, we certainly get our share. Last year, in the district court, one of the district courts of Boston, a fellow from, I believe, Africa faced his second bank robbery, got convicted of 2 in a row. Okay, so he was given a guilty found verdict, which is sort of like pleading guilty, and, oh, by the way, you're going for jail this amount of time, and maybe nothing will ever happen to you. Well, the judge gave him 264 days, one shy of the magic 265, that would have rendered him handed over to ICE, okay? This judge tactically did that, okay? What happened was, within 2 weeks, if you may recall reading about this, he murdered brutally, slashed the throats of 2 doctors in the, I guess it was the Back Bay or South End of Boston. He was caught, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that should never happen. Last weekend here in Weymouth, a woman got raped and was charged with rape. He was from Africa, I believe, Ghana. He was given a $10,000 bail. I would think that in any court in the country,
an American citizen would never get a $10,000 bail on a violent rape. Right.
So this is what happened. This is a man known to be an immigrant, right? I guess apparently here on a visa or a green card, whatever.
Well, if he's here legally, that's another story. Well, but I'm talking about people who are here illegally committing horrific crimes. Look, the Kate Steinle is one example. There's
I'm just saying, Mike, this is another facet with this whole immigration situation from both ends, whether you're here legally or illegally. In his case, he was here legally, we have to assume, because they're not saying otherwise. However, I assume that in any district court in the country, and probably in any foreign land, if you're a foreigner and you've been charged with a serious crime, they're going to ask you for their passport, right? Well, they did not. He skipped the country.
Well, there you go. Once the crime is committed, then you got to treat the person with the same equal justice as citizens. The problem is illegals get better justice than legal citizens and legal residents. I thank you for calling. Good to talk to you, Nick. Appreciate it. Paul, on Route 1, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Hey, Mike, it's Paul here. Actually, what I was thinking, I was watching Governor Brown last night, or might have been this morning on the news, and I found him to be so arrogant, and he thinks he's so intelligent and so moral. But what really comes into my mind is we protect those things that we value. And he doesn't seem to value either the country or the state of California allowing people to treat it like that. We have our doors locked at night to protect our families and our property and our houses. I think it's just an extension of that.
Well, look, he's wrong when he says he protects citizens. He doesn't protect citizens. He protects illegal aliens, some of whom are violent criminals. There shouldn't be one human being killed by an illegal alien, and there have been many killed by illegal aliens. There shouldn't be one if we took care of protecting the border. You wouldn't see China doing that. They don't even let North Koreans in. They're buddies. You wouldn't see Mexico doing that. They don't do it. They enforce immigration laws in Mexico. The only Eastern Europe, you wouldn't see it. Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, the Slovakia. You don't see it there. You will see it in Western Europe because of their squishy left-wing attitudes. Angela Merkel and others, oh, come on in, join the crowd. All the people from the Middle East, which wind up causing rapes and crimes, as in Norway and Sweden, where in Sweden the women were raped dramatically in large numbers, by the hundreds, by illegal aliens coming in from the Middle East. So we've got this problem, and we don't want to enforce it. And Trump is trying to do it, but he can't get Congress to cooperate to do common sense things. I appreciate it, Paul, and I thank you. And Jerry Brown is the leader of an organized crime organization, as I said. He should be prosecuted under the RICO statutes for an ongoing criminal conspiracy to protect illegal aliens at the expense of the American people. Good to have you with us. It's the Kuhner Report. Mike Siegel for Jeff Kuhner. And we are coming up now to 1:50 at the Voice of Boston, WRKO. We're back at it. Good to have you with us on the Kuhner Report. Mike Siegel in for Jeff as he is off for the rest of the week, 1:53 in the afternoon. Our number is 617-266-6868. An intolerable situation. The Republicans take control of the House and the Senate and do nothing, zero, zilch, nada, about the immigration problem. The president offered an amazing deal. Of course, that was the pinnacle of giving not 690,000 DACA residents that Obama was going to give, or did give, but 1.8 million, nearly triple the number, on a path to citizenship. All he asked for was the wall, the end of chain migration, the end of lottery visas. And guess what? The Republicans didn't even vote totally for that. Something like 36 or 38 Republicans voted for it when there were 51 in the Senate. That means you have a group of Republicans even who do not support legitimate immigration reform. Peg in West Bridgewater, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Mike, how are you?
Good.
Listen, I think we should have a national walk on the town hall day to show Washington we're sick of it. Everybody can't go to Washington, Mike, but we all have a town hall we can go and protest. What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. If somebody should organize it, you could do it right through, Jeff could do it through his program.
I think it's great.
Because what you could do is just say on let's say, I don't know, June 12th at noon, local time, wherever you are at noon, or you could even make it the same time. So it would be maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Boston and noon in California, to adjust for the time zones, and then do it all at the same time all over the country. Maybe do it at the state capitals, at 50 state capitals, and have these protests. And if you can get several thousand people at each protest in all 50 states, you got some power there. I appreciate it, and I thank you. I hope somebody does that, because it would be one way to protest and vent this outrageous policy of do nothing by this government, including the Republicans, who are shameful on this regard. Chris in Boston, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO. Hello.
Yeah, hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good.
Listen, I have to calm down first off when I heard this topic. My brother was killed by an illegal Mexican foreign national. We call them illegal aliens.
I'm terribly sorry to hear that.
That was November 17th of just this past year. Now, people are myopic with respect to this topic and illegals doing damage. Okay? Myopic, narrow-minded, short-sighted, call it what you will. Long story short, is that has a ripple effect in multiple people's lives. My brother was caught up in a 7-car accident in a remote area of Florida near Yeehaw Junction. Yeah, there's a place called Yeehaw Junction. And he burned up in his vehicle, and that didn't just affect his life. 7 people, 3 died immediately. Okay? We had, and I figured this out, between 1,200 and 2,500 people per person got affected by each person's death. 7 people, 7 vehicles were involved in that horrific accident because an illegal Mexican foreign national decided he wanted, 22 years old, decided he wanted to drink and drive with his buddies who were also illegal Mexican foreign nationals. Okay, 1,200 to 2,500 people, Mike. Okay, per person. That's a lot of people. It just doesn't affect one person.
No, but it affected you, and your family member should not have died. Look, I understand that there are people in the country who are citizens and legal residents who commit crimes and people die.
That's
and we
okay. They're Americans.
We have to deal with it, but we don't. We should not have to deal with one person dying at the hands of an illegal. Thank you for calling, and I appreciate it. Very good to talk to you. Let's go to Roland in Rhode Island. Roland, you're on the Voice of Boston, WRKO.
Yes, hi, Mike. The only thing we have laws in the books, don't we, that say that these people that are coming over the border that are pregnant and saying that their child is now a citizen of this country. I thought that law was passed for slaves only.
No, that's called anchor babies, and the way the Constitution is interpreted in that regard is that if you're born here, you're a citizen. But if you look at the debates that took place when the first 10 amendments to the Constitution were debated by the founders, they had no intention of having people, they've even talked about it, not having people come across the border to have babies and have them become American citizens. Even back then they understood that was not to be the case.
Well, then I think that our Congress needs to change that law, and that'll avert a lot of the issues.
Well, the simple question, why don't they just pass a law to end chain migration and lottery visas and put in E-Verify so that if a guy wants to hire somebody, he can run their name and social security number through the system to find out if they're here legally? Why not do that? I mean, they're not doing it because they want the illegals coming in, and they're betraying the overwhelming majority of the American people, as Ira Melman said earlier. I appreciate the call, and I thank you for it. It's good to talk to you all on the program. Dr. Gerard Lamero joins us after the news. We'll talk about Jim Comey and the outrageousness of his being a pomp and circumstance fluffy liar. Comey is a complete bald-faced liar. Much more coming. Stay with us.
The Voice of Boston is you. 680 WRKO Boston, 100.7 WCLX HD2 Boston, an iHeart radio station.